All right, good morning. I am here with David Lea from Nashville, Tennessee. He started Daring Deeply, and I've really been looking forward to this conversation because David and I spoke a couple weeks ago and kind of dug in a little bit deep to, what he coaches. So we're going to be talking about radical responsibility and masculine and feminine energies, right?
Absolutely.
So thank you,
Absolutely.
David, and welcome. Can you tell us
Absolutely.
about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Monica.
Mhm.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, my name is David Lee, and together with my wife, Paige Lee, we own and operate our coaching practice, and we specialize in what we refer to as trauma-informed polarity. So we help men, women, and couples begin to identify, validate, and heal their emotional wounds that are still unprocessed from childhood, and we run them through the filter of masculine and feminine energy. So we address the wounds that are still left unhealed that are causing the issues within their marriage, within their relationship. So, for example, if a woman is overbearing, over controlling, go, 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 do, boss babe, boss babe, hyper independence, trying to control the world around her, she is unequivocally in her wounded masculine energy. And why is she there? Well, there's a myriad of different reasons, and that's what we dig into. But typically, she is always attracted and married to and is drawn to men in their wounded feminine energy, which is more of a passive, more of a reluctant energy, more of a people pleasing and levels of codependency. And so, far more often than not, men and women will come to us looking for help who are in an inverted marriage dynamic, meaning she is more in her masculine, she and he is more in his feminine, and they come to us saying, "We need help. What is going on?" And so what we've recognized is that men and women are aligning with this misalignment, saying, "Oh my goodness, this is us." She's exhausted, overwhelmed, and burned out, and may or may not know why. And he feels emasculated and less than and purposeless, and he knows he has no idea. And so we help both of those individuals. So we work with married couples. Yes, we work with men and women, but we work with everyone independently, which brings us to how you introduce me, which is radical personal responsibility, extreme ownership. You do not heal, fix, or mend a marriage. You heal yourself.
Mhm.
And perhaps if two individuals, if two spouses, the husband and the wife, engage in this healing process, of course, then the romantic relationship can further thrive in ways they've never seen before. How do I know this? Is because I spent the vast majority of my adult life in my wounded feminine energy, and therefore I attracted more wounded masculine women. In fact, when Paige and I met, we were inverted. I was more in my feminine, she was more in her masculine. And over time, because of doing this work ourselves, we reversed that dynamic. We reversed that misalignment. And now I am far more in my masculine and feeling exactly where I'm supposed to be: purposeful, strong, and powerful, and devoted, and provisionary, and protective. And
Mhm.
Paige now is far more in her healing feminine energy, where she is more in her radiance, her brilliance, her ideation, her creativity, her rest, her relaxation, her sensuality, her flirtation, which is all inherently part of the healing feminine energy. And so now we take what we have learned and now what we continue to integrate not only in our own marriage, but we help men and women and couples across the planet do the same.
I I love what you're saying. And I love how you describe the wounded masculine and the wounded feminine.
Hmm.
How did you guys even where did this even start? I know you guys met the beginning of COVID.
We did, yeah.
So
Yeah,
what
that's a fun,
what
that's a,
got you
yeah.
into like looking at these energies?
hmm Yeah. I think that I've been in somewhat in tune with energy forever. And quite frankly, as we describe our healing modality and our process in how we take men and women and couples through this, is we know that this is rooted in science, rooted in energy. In fact, if we don't have opposing poles of energy, we fall off the planet. North, South Pole, magnetism, attraction, repulsion. Well, we
Mhm.
believe that those energies then carry forth and are identified as masculine or feminine. And every single person on the planet possesses both. We all possess both. masculine and feminine energy, regardless of how you identify. This has nothing to do and not connected to gender,
Hmm.
which can be confusing when we're first teaching this. Is, oh, you're talking about gender roles. No, absolutely not. We're not. What we are identifying is that there is an energy that is masculine, which is devoted and powerful and strong and inquisitive and predictive.
And I can have a masculine energy, even though.
Absolutely, for
Mhm.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, in essence, what we do is we help men and women dig deep into the trauma wounding that has placed them and led them into their inverted personal energies. So a woman in her wounded masculine, there's a reason. Why is it? It's unprocessed childhood trauma. That's where we merge those two ideas and aspects together. So where did all this come from? I think I've always believed. Go ahead.
Can you throw some examples out of
Yeah.
like, growing up, how a female could get into that wounded masculine energy and bring it
Yeah.
into adulthood?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a myriad of different possibilities of what happens to a little girl growing up in an environment where she lacks exposure to healing masculine energy, primarily from her father, primarily from grandfather, primarily from an uncle, primarily from a coach or a mentor, but primarily from dad. So if dad is emotionally absent or geographically absent, he is
Mhm.
not part of the home. What that's going to do is it's going to leave a wound where she is pining for, searching for healthy masculine energy to lead her, to love her, to cherish her, to honor her, to provide for her, to protect her, to show her the way. And if that's not there, she will begin to seek breadcrumbs and elements and aspects of that healing masculine, but it's just small little portions of it. And so she will pine for whatever she can find. And typically, what she begins to find is either a man in his wounded masculine energy, which means he shows elements and aspects of healthy masculine, but deep down it's wounded masculine, but she knows not the difference. That's why a woman is often attracted to a bad boy.
Right.
That is wounded masculine energy because
Yeah.
seemingly he has his stuff together. He's
Mhm.
exciting and vibrant and dangerous,
Right.
which underneath are elements of some healthy masculine. But
Hmm.
ultimately, he's in trouble.
Yeah.
She may find that out down the road, or this same girl may begin to search for what feels safer than that dominating, overpowering, wounded masculine. And she may begin to search for a man who's easy to control, who needs to be taken care of,
Hmm.
who is more passive. She begins to identify with the ability to take care of someone because she didn't have the masculine energy in her childhood that said, no, masculine energy takes care of you.
Yeah.
So we have two vast differences in the spectrum where a woman will attract a controlling, overbearing, wounded masculine man, or she will attract a more passive, more reluctant, more people pleasing, more codependent feminine man. So it all begins in childhood and what she's specifically exposed to. And
Mhm.
what's really important to understand about trauma in general, Monica, is that trauma simply is identified as your nervous system being overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And so in the case of what we're speaking to, when a little girl experiences abandonment, dismissal, ignoring, abuse, whatever it is,
Mhm.
okay? It can come from dad, it can come from mom, it can come from whatever. But once an experience happens, because trauma is not an event, by the way, it's not an experience. What happens is when a traumatic experience occurs in a girl's life
Mhm.
and it doesn't have the opportunity to be processed by someone with whom she trusts, a caregiver who is in a place of healing energy to say, babe, it's okay. I've got you. It's all right. I know this sucks right now. How can I help? I'm going to help you process this, which is incredibly rare,
Yeah.
right? Because typically the wounding comes from a parent who is wounded. And where did that come from? Their childhood wounding. And so we pass it on generationally.
Lord have
So
mercy.
if she is in that space where her nervous system is overwhelmed and it's not allowed to be processed, it will enter then into her nervous system and remain there and begin to be recycled over and over and over and over, and will carry her into adulthood. So then she will make decisions
Mhm.
based on the wounded parts of her that think that whatever occurred is normal, familiar.
Right.
And so she will make those choices in relationships that echo and mirror what she experienced in childhood.
So a trauma bond.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A
Hmm.
trauma bond. It feels familiar. It feels good.
Hmm.
Um,
Feels normal. Yeah.
yeah, it feels
Hmm.
normal.
Hmm.
So my mind is just going right now. I love this stuff. So let's talk about an example of a male who develops a wounded feminine
Hmm.
energy as a young boy.
Hmm. Typically that young boy has his voice silenced
Hmm.
or has his ability to make autonomous decisions, have a voice for the direction of his own life.
Hmm.
What we often see is that he is coddled, spoiled, and taken away the opportunity for him to decide, for him to earn, win, decide, fix, save, compete. Okay.
Right.
I often say this. The masculine energy, the healing masculine energy thrives in being challenged, not being praised, gifted, adored, flattered. And what we see is a boy who is coddled, spoiled, taken care of,
Hmm.
will then begin to harness those wounded feminine energies. And he will begin to search for a woman who, in essence, will mother him. And
So,
that paired with a woman who is in her wounded masculine, who is looking for somebody to take care of, they will always find each other. And
be
that is the trauma bond. Absolutely.
oh gosh, that is so deep. So now that takes me like as a parent,
Hmm.
I'll admit I coddle and I spoil my kids.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, there's discipline there, obviously, but and especially since I've come out of my relationship and it's just me and the kids, I
Hmm.
think I don't want to use the word coddling, like the nurturing that I have with them has kind of like stepped up a notch, maybe overcompensating for, me knowing that there's not that father figure in the house anymore, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Hmm. It does.
You know, so as parents, I feel like, from what you're saying, we almost need to be aware of we don't want to create these wounded feminine and masculine energies in our children.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because what that is the aforementioned passing on of generational trauma. So what
Right.
often happens when I'm communicating, when I'm talking, when I'm having conversations with women who are raising children on their own, which by the way, I encourage everyone who's watching, everyone who's listening, including you, Monica, to stop referring to yourself as a single mom. That is one of the harshest things you can do for your children because
Mhm.
what you're doing is you're identifying with something that's not you. You're not a single mom. You're a woman who happens to be in this position. Okay. So you are a woman first. And when your children see that you're putting yourself first, oh my goodness, it's the greatest gift you will ever give them. The greatest gift that a mother, I don't know if she's single, if she's married, the greatest gift a mother will ever give to her children is a healing her,
Yeah.
that she's taking care of her, that she is not putting them first. Now, there are probably a lot of people who just turned off this podcast, right? Because we have
They're like, I'm done.
we have developed a narrative that says a good mom puts her children first, and that is unequivocally, without question, unhealthy and untrue.
Mhm.
A woman who puts herself first, who puts her needs and her desires and her healing, growth, and transformation ahead of anything else
Mhm.
is a woman who will be an example to her sons, her daughters. As wow, that is what an interdependent, sovereign, autonomous
Mhm.
woman who takes extreme ownership over her trajectory and doesn't rely on the fact that she's taking care of her children and coddling them and giving them everything and overcompensating, because what that does is it develops a codependent trauma bond between her and her children.
Yeah.
And the boys in that environment will attract a woman in her wounded masculine energy. We've
Right.
seen it a million times. This is
Completely.
the law of polarity.
Yes. I completely agree with what you're saying. Absolutely. So when your clients come to you, where do you even start? You said you talk to them individually.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. We often have consultation. Well, that is the first step. We have a consultation call with someone, and oftentimes both husband and wife get on the call.
Mhm.
Fantastic. What's incredibly imperative and what I communicate incredibly clearly, is that I work with individuals. Now, ideally, I'm working with both the husband and the wife
Yeah.
independently. So when we jump onto a call, I help them to begin. And more than likely, they already know that's the reason why they're there. They already know that something's up. They're aware. That's why they're coming to us to say, we need help. Okay. So I help them first, even on that discovery call, begin to identify the original wounds from the unmet needs from childhood that is leading them into their inverted core energy.
Mhm.
All right. So if somebody says, well, I'm over controlling, I try to control my husband because he just doesn't get done what I need him to get done. Yeah. Well, that wound was there long before the husband came around.
Mhm.
This is often a myth that people believe, that things didn't go south until I got married. Nope. No, the wound has been there since childhood.
Mhm.
And you chose through the lens of that wound, that partner. So
Mhm.
this is what substantiates our theory of trauma only happens to individuals in childhood. You cannot be traumatized as an adult. That's a myth. So if somebody says, well, I didn't experience trauma until my marriage when my husband was an a-hole, well, the wounds within you chose said a-hole. As
Mhm.
hard as that is to hear, it's true.
Mhm.
So that is, again, what you refer to and what we refer to as a trauma bond. The wounded parts of her have attracted the wounded parts of him.
Mhm.
So if we can get to that understanding, if we can get to that sobering knowledge, we can begin.
Right.
People typically will not come to us if they're still in the blame shifting, bitter, resentful space. They're
Mhm.
not quite ready for what we can provide them. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. So if someone is ready to take full extreme ownership over their wounding and knowing I want to heal, and the possibility, it's really important, the possibility that the marriage can then prosper, then they're ready for us. But if people come to us and say, please help us save our marriage, I will say to them very clearly, I am not for you. I
Mhm.
cannot help you. Because you don't save a marriage. You don't fix a relationship. That's that's a myth. Okay. This is why more often than not, couples counseling, couples therapy, couples coaching is ineffective.
Mhm.
Because what you're taking is two independent, sovereign trauma histories and throwing them into a room and thinking you're going to decipher what's going on.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Monica, if you have personal experience with couples counseling, couples therapy, but more often than not, when couples come into that room for the first time, they're ready for a fight.
Mhm.
And they're ready for this therapist or this coach or this counselor to solve their marriage problem. And that cannot happen. It's
Yeah.
impossible. You have to stay in your lane of
Mhm.
your healing exclusively.
All right. So that's going to bring me to this question. What happens when you have a couple come to you and you've got one spouse wanting and understanding what you're saying and agreeing that they need to address their wounded childhood
Mm-hmm.
traumas, and then you've got another spouse who just thinks it's bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you do
Yeah,
with that?
absolutely. Well, the person that is seeking the help, they have a choice to make.
Mhm.
They can continue on their own independent healing journey or not. This happens.
Mhm.
And it happens where one spouse is ready to move forward, the other one is reluctant or even combative. And so the person who is absolutely ready to move forward in their healing journey has a really tough decision to make,
Yeah.
which brings them back to a clear understanding of the depths of codependency between them. That says, well, I have to wait for my spouse. I want him to come with me. I want her to be here with me.
Mhm.
And now we've identified, some codependent controlling actions, right? That says, oh, we have to do this together. No, no, you don't. That's ideal. Sure.
Mhm.
In fact, what I often tell folks and what I did myself on my wedding day to Paige is the only vow that I said to her was this: I vow to commit to my own healing, growth, and transformation so that then I can support you who is committed to do the same.
Mm.
There was no till death do us part, two shall become one. We're going to have a 401k and a picket fence and great sex and maybe some kids.
Yeah.
No, we commit to our own independent healing.
Right.
And whether or not our partner chooses to, that is absolutely their prerogative. But it cannot be something that drags you back or keeps you from moving forward.
Mhm.
It's hard. It's
And,
really hard. That's why, quite frankly, Monica, that's why most people don't engage because they're so enmeshed together. They
yeah.
have bought into the narrative that says we're a couple.
Mhm.
Well, that's why they're there, is because they've lost themselves.
Yeah.
And so they don't know how to then become unencumbered from that enmeshment, from that codependency. And they think, well, we have to do this together. Well, most of the world says you go to couples therapy,
Yeah.
marriage counseling.
Mhm.
What we do is we buck that trend. We say, oh no, oh no, 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 no. You must focus solely on you. Well,
Mhm.
what happens if I begin my work and I'm really growing and healing and feeling incredible about who I am and how I'm moving forward, and my spouse continues to stay where they are? Well, then you have more important questions to ask.
Mhm.
So,
And it seems to me that that's going to trickle over into your friendships, into your workplace environment,
for sure.
how you interact
Absolutely.
with your coworkers.
Without question. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So, this lends into, and I was talking with one of my clients yesterday, and he said, I seem to have it so much easier to enact these radical, extreme ownership principles of not taking things personal and staying in my lane and owning my stuff and setting boundaries with everyone else but my wife. Uh-huh, exactly. Because
Wow.
here's the irony. Your romantic relationship is the last, not the first, the last that will come into a healthy perspective.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're there. Because you bonded to them,
Mhm.
most notably through traumatic experiences
Right.
from childhood. But your sister, your kids, your coworkers, your bestie, no, because
Yeah.
it's not as vibrant of a connection. Now, will you see some of that? And you may begin to make different choices in who you choose as friends and acquaintances and careers. Yes, absolutely. Because your eyes will become open and you'll begin to realize, oh, I think I'm trauma bonding with that person too.
Right.
And what we find almost exclusively
Mhm.
is that the people that work with us, their social lives begin to dramatically shift and change as they begin to work with us because now they are realizing, oh my goodness, I think I've made all of my relationship choices
Right.
based on my wounds. The answer to that question is you betcha. Absolutely. And you will begin to reassess. You will begin to analyze. You'll begin to see with a new set of eyes.
Right.
Oh, I think we're only together because we got drunk in college and we've just been friends for 20 years. Or our whole relationship is based on our kids playing soccer,
Mhm.
based on girls' nights out,
Mhm.
based on the fact that we both don't like our husbands.
Mhm.
All trauma bonds.
It's hard.
Yes,
But yeah.
exactly. It's incredibly hard.
So your best advice on how to break a trauma bond.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing I'll say, Monica, is that there's no advice that will ever help you.
Mhm.
You don't extend advice. We extend wisdom. Advice is, hey, Monica, go do this. This is going to work for you. That's advice. So
Mhm.
to everyone that's watching and listening, stop receiving advice. And by the way, stop receiving advice, traveling advice. I'm going to say it again. Stop taking traveling advice from people who have never left home. Okay. Meaning,
That could
stop
be,
taking advice.
that could be a shirt.
There you go. Exactly. Stop taking traveling advice from those who've never left home.
Yeah.
Stop taking advice at all. Start listening to wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So, wisdom is, here is my experience. This is based on my expertise. This is how we've seen this work. Try this on.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we coach. That's effective and powerful and efficient coaching. So, to answer your question, the wisdom that we provide is the is to begin to identify and validate and heal. Begin to identify, validate, and heal. Identify, validate, and heal. So identify, first, when and how and why do I feel triggered? Not by them, because no one can trigger you without your consent. No
Mm-hmm.
one can make you feel or do anything without your consent. When
Mm-hmm.
we say, well, he made me feel this way. No, he didn't. You chose to respond to him in that way because of your wounding.
Yeah.
So when we can come to that extreme ownership perspective, we can begin to say, wow, I'm triggered when I hear this. Notice the language.
Mm-hmm.
I am triggered when I hear this, not when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
That is evidence of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
I'm triggered. I wonder why I'm triggered. Because he said something that resorts back to when I was 7 years old and my dad screamed at me. Well, yeah, and that's been resonating and recycling in your nervous system as trauma for 27 years. It just happened to be that your spouse was an echo of that original wound. And that's why the trigger came forward. So the trigger comes in the form of all types of manifestations,
Yeah.
physical ailments, emotional ailments, right? Anxiety, every physical and emotional symptom comes from unprocessed trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Cancer, lower back pain, hormone problems, everything comes from, because it's
Trauma,
simply,
trauma, trauma.
yeah, it's trauma, 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 simply
Yeah.
because your body is trying to get your attention.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you're struggling from migraines, it's not because your mom had migraines or because your husband is creating so much anxiety you can't stand it. No,
Yeah.
it's because you have unprocessed trauma and your body is expressing that warning light through a migraine.
Yeah.
And so we address the original wound that could be manifesting the pain that's coming inside the migraine. In fact, I'm working with a woman right now, and this is the very work that we're doing. Is that we first have identified, there's the process, we first identified when are you experiencing the migraines? And so
Mm-hmm.
we harness that in. We are experiencing it, this, and this. Okay. Now we're beginning to bring connective tissue to that pattern. And what we realized was the migraines began when she was abused by her uncle at 17. Well, of course. Of course, of course, of course. So
Yeah.
then we can look at that original wound, is what we call it, leveraging Richard Schwartz's work, parts work, IFS, internal family systems. We are identifying the original incident, and that may be the original incident of when that wound was manifested inside the body and didn't have the proper processing for it to be released.
Right.
So she carries that wound and it manifests in a migraine. Now, it could manifest in lower back pain. It could manifest in cancer. It could manifest in poor eyesight. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
a myriad of different things, right? But we have to identify, then we have to begin to validate, to begin to say, oh, yeah, this is what's going on. Oftentimes, that's the scariest part, is we have to not shoo the wound away.
Mm-hmm.
We don't mindset it away. We don't toxic positivity it away. Oh, the sun will come out tomorrow. It's okay. Get over it. Think positive thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work. Okay. It does for 5 minutes, but it's like a band-aid on a lethal wound.
Mm-hmm.
We have to get to the root cause. And the root cause in this particular case was she was abused. Her autonomy, sovereignty, her body was taken from her. You
Mm-hmm.
don't think that's going to help? You don't think that's going to hinder something that's going on in her body forever? Of course it is. But we go deeper than rape counseling, right? We go deeper. We want to understand that that is a significantly powerful wound, but it doesn't have to define her life. It shapes her, absolutely, but it doesn't have to define how she's going to treat herself and talk to herself and leverage the shame that may still be left over from that moment.
All right,
and
let
it's
me
manifest. Go ahead, please.
well, my first question I'm going to ask you is when you say it needs to be processed, like define how you process something like that happens to you when you're younger.
Hmm. Yeah. So when we identify the wound, we begin to literally, Monica, have conversations
Hmm.
with that little girl, with that little boy,
Hmm.
literally, verbally, through a journal,
Yeah.
through prayer, through meditation, whatever it may be. We
Right.
literally begin conversations, and perhaps for the first time, because the trigger, the wounded part of us that's coming forward, that's keeping us from what we want in life, is the warning light, is the little boy or little girl going, hello, you know,
Mhm.
we're still 7. They
Yeah.
don't know that you're 50. They don't know that you're 40.
Hmm.
They believe, the parts of you, the wounded parts of you still believe that you're 7 years old. And that's why they act that way, by the way. When you hear somebody say, you're acting so childish. Exactly. Because the wounded part of you is a child.
Hmm.
So we have to identify and begin to communicate with that wounded part. Things like, I see you. I hear you.
Yeah.
I honor you. What do you need from me right now? Help me understand. I'm sure this is really tough for you right now. That's a process that
Right.
takes time, right? Because oftentimes we have been told, we have been programmed to not go back because it could hurt us more.
Hmm.
But here's the good news. You cannot be re-traumatized.
Hmm.
It's impossible. Okay. So we are going to go back and be with the wounded part, not
Hmm.
in it, with it. Putting the arm around the wounded little boy or girl that's you
Hmm.
and saying, I see you, I hear you, I value you, I honor you, I cherish you. What do you need from me right now? How can I help? Tell me about why you're coming forward and screaming and yelling and keeping this, this, and this.
Right. I love that.
Imagine, by the way, imagine if the closest people to us did that for us too,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When Paige honors, validates what I'm saying, doesn't mean she agrees with it.
Hmm.
She validates it. Babe, I see you. I can understand your perspective. I can completely understand why you're coming that way. I can completely understand why you think and believe that. Rather than, I don't know what you're thinking that.
Yeah.
Why are you overreacting? That's
Mhm.
stupid. You shouldn't be blank, whatever. Right? So, how we begin to communicate with those wounded parts of us is a template that will help us heal so we can leverage that template with the ones that we love in real time.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, you cannot love, you cannot honor, you cannot cherish, you cannot respect, you cannot understand other people until
Hmm.
you do the same for yourself.
Hmm.
So when you begin this new processing relationship with the wounded part of you,
Hmm.
what happens is that wounded part begins to feel safe.
Yeah.
Just like anybody feels safe when you validate them
Right.
as opposed to judge them. Wow, tell me more, help me understand. I can understand why you think that way.
And when you
Rather
say it,
than, yep.
it doesn't sound so scary,
Mm-hmm,
and I'll myself included. When I think of my childhood, like I feel like I had a wonderful childhood. Now I know that there's trauma there. I know
mm-hmm,
that several years, and it wasn't until I would say maybe the past 8 months, I never wanted to dig deep into my childhood to figure out where that trauma came from.
mm-hmm,
Because on the outside, like I had a great childhood, and that's just what I've
mm-hmm,
always told myself. I had a
mm-hmm.
wonderful childhood. I was
Sure.
happy. I felt loved, et cetera, et cetera. But when you describe it this way, it doesn't feel as scary to dig deep into my childhood to figure out what it was. Because I know the end result is that I'm going to be a better person, not just for me, but for my kids and
Mm-hmm.
for whoever my significant other is going to be in the future.
Precisely. Well
Hmm.
said. Yeah.
Yeah,
So here's an indicator for those that are listening and for you as well, Monica, is if we're resistant to look at our childhood, that's a trauma bond,
yeah.
right? Because there's a part of you that says don't.
Hmm.
Now, why? Because that wounded part of you, whoever it is, whatever age that is, thinks
Right,
that if you do, you could be harmed more,
right,
which is why we don't,
right.
which is why we don't go digging, right?
Yeah, which
Is
means I need
no,
to
no,
go
no, no,
talk.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm
Yeah,
fine. I'm good. Time
I need
heals all wounds. Yeah.
uh-huh.
Hmm. Yeah. So that's my mentor said this long ago. He said, the only credentials that anyone needs to help people process and heal trauma is that they provide a safe and secure environment to do so.
Right.
That's it. And that's what Paige and I do. We work incessantly to ensure that our environments, our coaching environments, our group coaching environments, how we hold calls, we want to provide a safe, secure, and challenging environment for them to go to places that feel scary, but
Yeah.
knowing that they're not alone, that we've got them, that we're holding their hand, that
Mm.
they're not going to do this without the professional and loving and honorable care that we can provide, because it is scary. That's
Yeah.
why that's why the vast majority of the planet is walking around wounded. That's why there's conflict in the Middle East. That's
Mhm.
why we have a political landscape like we do in this country. It's
Mhm.
not because people are just effed up. It's because it's a collective, unprocessed trauma experience where
Right.
people think they're going to be hurt if they agree with Trump,
Mhm.
or hurt if they agree with Harris.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's not the ground force of what we're doing. We have got to, and so when people say, so what do you think about what's going on in the world and what are you doing about it? Here's what I'm doing about it. This,
Yeah.
helping individuals
Mhm.
and perhaps couples independently
Mhm.
begin to identify, validate, and heal their emotional wounds from unprocessed trauma from childhood, one person at a time.
I,
That's what
I
I'm doing.
I love what you and Paige are doing. That's amazing. Can you talk a little bit about what life is like with I mean, obviously our social media platforms are somewhat of our highlight reel,
They are,
but life
can be.
with you and Paige,
Mhm.
you know, talk a little bit about that.
Uh, I was mentioning this to her in an open conversation in our home last week, I believe. I said sometimes I have to stop and pause and realize 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that there was no way that I would ever experience what I'm experiencing now in this relationship with you
Mhm.
because of where I've come from, the trauma that I experienced in childhood that led me to make choices to marry and complete two marriages, to then spend 10 plus years in the dating space, making even more unwise decisions, to say the least.
Mhm.
It makes no sense, and it makes absolute sense because not so long ago, I made the independent choice to begin this work for me.
Mhm.
And as I before mentioned, she does the same every single day. That is a relationship. And the outcome of that is an otherworldly, purpose driven, passion filled, peace filled relationship that is built on two individuals who have committed to do their healing work every single day. Now,
Mhm.
is it rainbows and butterflies every day? No, of course not.
Mhm.
But it's very interesting that literally our lives is the tapestry of how we then bring it to the world. So
Yeah.
we're getting ready to launch our podcast here later this fall.
Mhm.
And we've dabbled in podcasting, but we're taking a huge step in the investment of really having an incredible team, incredible production team here in Nashville, to take our podcast and bring it to the world. Because what we've recognized is that when people spend time with David and Paige, literally live time in our retreat environments, on calls, socially, is what we've realized is that we have been incredibly blessed and honored because we're doing the work and people feel something different. And so
Yeah.
when they begin to watch and ingest what we're bringing forward in that podcast, we feel that that's going to bring this even further out into the world. So what does it feel like? Peace,
Yeah.
purpose, passion, understanding, depth, fun, playfulness, laughter, adventure. That's what it feels like.
That just gives me chills, David. I love that. I love what you and Paige are doing, and absolutely do a podcast. I think that would explode. So tell the listeners how they can contact you.
Mhm. You can find us on our website, which is another project that is in the works. That's getting ready to be relaunched, but you can find us there. The website is daring-deeply.com. Daring-deeply.com. That's the name of our coaching practice, Daring Deeply. You can find us on the web. We have a significant presence on social media, most notably on TikTok and Instagram. So you can find me there. You can find Paige as well. Paige is Mrs. Paige Lea on Instagram, and I believe that's what she is on TikTok. We have a YouTube channel, vast array of videos that people can go in there and watch us banter back and forth and teach, and then solo videos that they can engage in as well. Plus, we have a presence on Facebook. So send me a DM, find me. I answer, believe it or not, Monica, I answer every single DM that comes my way because I want people to know that they're seen and heard. Now, they may not be the right fit for us, and we may not be the right fit for them, but it's certainly, and everybody is worth a conversation.
Nice. And we'll put those links in the show notes as well.
Fantastic.
Thank you for your wisdom.
Thank you, Monica, for the opportunity. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
this is great. I really enjoyed this conversation. So I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.